we've all been there. You've spent ages sweating away in time trial, trying to set the fastest lap possible, looking to gain the most minuscule advantage to propel yourself up the leaderboard, and then finally it happens. The perfect lap. You've nailed every apex, you're on the run up to the line, and you're convinced you're about to set a time that'll set the world alight. Until about 3 seconds later, when it turns out you're about as quick as a nun on a bicycle, and you're left wondering just where is all that time. Well, today's your lucky day because I'm going to be giving you my top hints and tricks to get yourselves up to speed and get yourselves as far up that leaderboard as quickly as possible. So let's get straight into the video. Yes, hello everybody, welcome back to the XSmithyX YouTube channel and back to the beginner series, the series where we take an absolute novice in the Formula 1 games and try and make them into one of the top 1% of drivers in the world. If you did miss the last episode, do go and check it out, it's a very important one, uploaded quite a while ago now for this weekly series. But we taught you how to set your game up, get your camera set up properly and properly calibrate your equipment, and today we're going to get out on track. Before we get started with our actual list, a quick honourable mention for those who did watch the last part to do with the racing line. Understand how it works properly. So, in the last video, I recommended for newcomers to the series to use the racing line assist on corners only to help you learn the track quicker. But what does the racing line assist do and how does it work? Well, as you can see on the screen in front of you right now, it is a line that will appear on the circuit showing you the game's recommended line that you should take through the corners, as well as using a colour coding system to indicate where you should be braking, accelerating, etc. Now, when we go a little bit deeper into the series, we'll talk about how this isn't perfect and you shouldn't follow it rigidly, but to begin with, it's important to know how it works if you are going to use it to learn the circuits. Now, following the line is relatively simple, I don't really need to explain that, that is really where you should be aiming to put your car. But I do see people failing to fully utilise the colour coding system and therefore not really using the assist to its advantage. So what do the colours mean? When the line is green, as you can pretty much work out, that means you should be on the throttle. You don't need to be braking, it's completely flat out as you saw through most of the circuit there. However, when you get towards a braking zone, the colour of the line will change. There will be a short, very very short in fact, little period where the line will go yellow, which sort of warns you that you might be going a little bit too quick and should think about slowing down, before it goes bright red, which is the game's way of saying, Jesus Christ, slow down. Now going into this corner, we're going to pause the footage. As you can see, we're going into a braking zone. We're in a straight line, the line is still green, and therefore you should really still be accelerating at this point. However, you can see just in front of us a very brief little period of yellow before the line goes bright red. Now to get the most out of this assist, the ideal point of braking, which I'll show you as we move the footage forward very slightly, is right at the point where the line goes fully red. Now if you understand how that works, it is a very useful tool for absolutely maximising braking zones, which is where a lot of time is won or lost, either through being way too conservative or by overshooting corners completely. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the actual driving techniques that you will need to master if you truly want to become one of the fastest on this game. Tip number 1 then is very very simple. Build your pace up slowly. Now, what do I mean by this? Essentially, what you're seeing on screen is the way that I approach learning new circuits and building my pace. It's to jump into a time trial session and just keep doing laps. But instead of trying to go all out on the first lap and trying to set the world record, build your pace up slowly. As you can see here, we've done 4 laps in a row, and if you look at the times, we've actually gained a second and a half. And that's happened in just 4 laps. So what am I doing here? What is the process behind what I'm doing? Well, it's very very simple. No one, not even Jana Watmir, jumps onto the game for the first time and absolutely nails the perfect lap. It's built up through muscle memory and through trial and error. So what you don't want to be doing is jumping into the game and immediately trying to set that fast lap, because all you're going to do is build up muscle memory of mistakes, and that is how you get inconsistent lap times. What you want to be doing is jumping in and taking it very very conservatively for the first lap. The next lap, try and push it just a little bit more, not to the limit, but just a tiny bit more, just an extra tenth, 2 tenths, something like that. The next lap, do the same again, push the limits just a little bit further, and what this will do is it will very slowly build you up to the point where you can find the limits of the track and consistently reach them, rather than sort of guessing, as I see most people tending to do, which is why they're so inconsistent. One of the big things that I've worked on during my league racing season, which if you want to watch those live, we do live stream them here on YouTube every Thursday, is not only my raw pace but also the consistency. And the way that I build that up is doing exactly what I'm saying here, is simply building up to the limit rather than trying to go from 0 to 100 straight away. think about any task you do in life. You never try and do the entire task in one go, you break it down into small segments. So start off nice and easy, and then next lap think, right, I'll try and brake 5 meters earlier, or I'll try and get on the throttle, tiny bit earlier through that corner. And if you keep doing this every single lap, slowly and slowly, you'll get more comfortable with driving quicker rather than trying to be at the limit as soon as possible. And if you make a mistake, well, the next lap around, you know to dial it back just that little bit for that corner. This will help you find the limit, this will help improve your pace and improve your consistency, as you'll be able to very, very slowly make the incremental gains, which are what separates the best drivers in the world from those who are merely mediocre. And this repetition, in fact, leads on to tip number 2. And to put it simply, it's this: make mistakes, but don't restart. Now, this is one we're all guilty of. We're on a hot lap, it's going well, and then we make a stupid little mistake. We run wide, we go off the circuit and a lap gets invalidated, and we instantly pause it and go for that restart button. However, if you want to improve, I cannot stress this enough, you need to stop doing this. Now, this is only something that I have been implementing in my driving quite recently, and it has made a huge difference. Now, it is a weird one, because obviously you think, well, if your lap's ruined, what's the point in carrying on? But the point is, as we sort of mentioned in the last tip, is the repetition of getting the whole circuit. If you're continuously making a mistake at, say, turn 3 around Silverstone, and every single time you do, you restart, that means that you're going to get really, really good at the first 3 corners, but then you're not practicing the rest of the lap. You need to practice a lap as a whole, as you do a nice little pirouette there, because when you do qualify and when you're in a race, you don't get to do just a bit of the track over and over again, you're doing the whole lap. So you really need to get into the habit of not restarting. If you make a mistake, just carry on, and then next time around, as we mentioned in the previous tip, just remember what it is you did wrong. Did you brake a little bit too late? Well, next time, brake a little bit earlier then. Making mistakes isn't the issue, it's if you don't learn from it. And if you're continuously restarting and continuously flashbacking to really nail one corner, you're sacrificing the rest of the lap because you won't be as practiced at those parts. So, nice and simple tip this one, don't use the restart button when you make a mistake. So, I know what you're thinking, Reese, that's all well and good, but have we got any actual driving tips? Well, we do. The next tip, very, very simple, learn to be as smooth as possible with your steering inputs. Now, this tip is very important whether you use a wheel, or even more importantly if you're on a controller. Now, just take a look at the footage in front of you, and on this lap, what I've tried to do is to replicate what I see quite a lot with newer people when they're first on the game. The steering tends to be quite janky, it tends to be very aggressive, and when they get to corners you can see them using full lock when it's not really necessary, and if anything actually makes understeer worse. Now, we've only gone through about 3 corners here, but if we look at the delta in the top right, you can see we're already 7/10 of a second down on our fastest lap, and that is completely down to our turning. Now, if you watch this footage, for example, this is a lap where we go a lot smoother. You can see going through turn 1, one nice smooth steering input, same through this corner, and you'll see especially through these next 2 tight corners, how we are nice and smooth, just one motion, turning the car in, and without the lot of jerking motions. While it does look more aggressive, you can see as we come out of this corner and we check the delta, where we were 7/10 down previously, we're now pretty much level with our personal best. Now, being as smooth as you can when steering does have a lot of benefits with things like tyre wear. However, that is something we'll get into later in the series. Today we're focusing purely on speed, and why does steering have such an impact on this? And it's very, very simple. It's all to do with balance and to do with weight transfer. If you're very aggressively jerking your wheel around compared to being nice and smooth with it, you'll notice that the car tends to become unsettled a lot easier. Imagine it's like you're stood in the middle of a seesaw. If you take very small steps towards one side, the seesaw won't tip too much. However, if for example you were to jump to the left, you would see the seesaw massively tilt in that direction, and it's all to do with weight transfer. You don't want to dramatically shift the centre of weight in the car too much or too quickly, because that is how the car spins, that's how you get oversteer, and that's how you become unbalanced. You really want to focus, as you can see on the footage here, on very smooth, very precise inputs, because while it may look faster to be nice and aggressive on the wheel and shimmying and shaking it around, it doesn't make you any quicker, and it makes the car much, much harder to control, because you'll be losing the rear end a lot more often. So for tip number 3, as you can see on the screen, focus on nice smooth inputs with the steering. Try and do it in one motion if you can. Obviously, if you are on a controller, it will be slightly more difficult, so like I said in the last video, you might want to mess around with some of the calibration settings to make it a little bit easier for you. But tip number 3, make sure you are nice and smooth on the steering. Tip number 4 then, this follows on very similarly in fact to the last one, however this time we're going to focus on your braking and your throttle, and the tip is, once again, be as smooth as possible with these. Now, what I've tried to do on this lap that you're seeing on the screen in front of you is replicate what I see from quite a lot of new players in the game. You can see we're braking very early, we're coasting through corners, and then getting on the throttle way past the point, realistically, where you can with these cars. Now, this is often due to what I pointed out earlier with the braking assist, so if you did skip through that one, do make sure you go back and watch it. You need to learn where to brake properly and not coast into the corner. Now, we're going to focus here on the little bars in the bottom right. These are your brake and your throttle inputs. And you can see on this lap, where we have a little bit of a slide there actually, you'll notice that as we get in towards braking zones, we're braking too early, we're hitting the brakes and then completely lifting off and just letting the car coast through the corners, and then we get on the throttle far too aggressively. Now, as we come through Maggots and Beckett's here at Silverstone, just as I said, focus on these little bars at the bottom and just think about what they mean. If you're going into a corner and lifting off completely as I do here, all of that time there where we're not on the throttle is time that we're losing because we're not accelerating, we're not going anywhere. And similarly, if you're coasting into a corner rather than still being on the throttle or braking, for example, if you've braked too early, that means you've not reached the full potential of the car. You've not braked late enough, so you've lost time there. You're coasting through the corner, so you're not going as quick as you could be, and then you aren't on the throttle as quick on the exit, and that adds up to so much lap time over the course of a lap. Now, if we watch the footage on this lap, you can see this is a lap where I'm going to drive to my normal standards. Once again, focus on those bars and you can see what I mean. As we hit the braking point, we brake really, really late, we're braking all the way into the corner, and then there is a smooth transition where we come off the brakes and then get straight on the throttle. We don't allow the car to coast because that means essentially we're wasting potential. And this is something that you really want to focus on and make a conscious effort to make sure you are very quickly off the throttle and on the brakes, and then as you come off the brakes, straight back on the throttle as you saw there. You don't want to be coasting. It will take a bit of time to get used to if you are one of these people who has gotten used to coasting into corners, and it will take a conscious effort, but the more you do it, the more natural it will become, and you'll be surprised how this very, very simple thing will actually make so much lap time around a track, especially tracks where you have a lot of high speed into low speed corners, because that transition is where you'll be losing most of your time, and it will improve your lap time, like I said, by an awful lot. So this tip, again, very simple. Make sure you're focusing on your transition between your brakes and your throttle. So finally then we come to the last tip, and this one is probably the most important one, but is also the most simple and the one that most people will fail at. It's that quite simply, getting quicker takes time. It takes hours of practice. Hopefully these videos are helping you to shortcut that, but for an example, I have probably spent this year alone probably about 500 hours in the Formula 1 games to be at the point where I am, and I'm still, you know, half a second, 6/10 of a second off the fastest guys in the world on Xbox. So it takes time. Obviously, like I said, these videos should help you shorten that time by giving you all the tips and tricks that I have used to help myself get quicker, but you need to practice. The Formula 1 games, they're all about repetition. It's all about muscle memory, especially when you start to drive without assist and you don't have that safety net behind you. Things like trail braking, things like moderating the throttle coming out of corners, all of those are things that become natural the more you do it. So there really is no substitute for practice, practice, practice. If you focus really hard, you use all the tips I've used in this video, making sure you build your pace up slowly, not restarting, consistently going through your laps, and focusing on being as smooth as possible using your inputs, both with your steering, not coasting into corners, braking late, getting nice and early on the throttle. All of this put together with time will help you improve massively with your driving. However, if you would like more in-depth tips, if you would like more of a one-to-one feeling, I am now offering driver coaching on my Discord. The link for that is in the description below, completely free of charge. I will never ever charge for anything like this, where you can submit hot laps if you want me to analyse them compared to my own, or if you would like a one-to-one session where we'll sit down and talk through a more in-depth question. That is all available in the Discord. Please check out the link if that kind of thing interests you. As always, if you have found it useful, do consider leaving a like, just because it does help with the YouTube algorithm pushing this video out. Do make sure you subscribe to the channel because there is a lot more of this to come, and as always, hopefully you have enjoyed it. I've been XSmithyX, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.